topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
Welcome to the Connected Table Live. We're your hosts, Melanie Young and David Ransom, your insatiably curious culinary couple. We travel the world to bring you the amazing people, places, food, and drink we experience because we want you to step out of your comfort zone and experience the world and see how amazing it is, whether you're eating, drinking, exploring, or looking for more inspiration. You're watching live on the Connected Table Live on YouTube. And you can hear all our shows on demand anytime on 65 podcast channels and follow us along at the Connected Table. So we're taking you to Washington State. There's a photo behind us to the Walla Walla Valley AVA to talk about the area and meet a vintner who has had multiple careers. And this is like his next chapter. We're talking about Frost alert, Doug Frost, who has had an amazing long career in the hospitality industry. He's been on the show in another capacity, but we're doing it now as he's a vintner. First of all, Doug is the first individual to attain both the Master of Wine and Master Sommelier recognitions, which only I think 4 people have done. Wow. He is a co-founder and co-creator of Beverage Alcohol Resources, a certification program for bartending professionals, and it's like really intense. We saw a great movie on it, Tales of the Cocktail.
Yep.
He also has been the longtime wine director at American Restaurant. I don't know for how many years, we'll ask him, in Kansas City, where he's from. And now Vintner is his latest chapter. And that's why we're in Walla Walla, because in 2018, Doug Frost and a pal of his in Kansas named Brad Bergman, who comes from a tree farm family, so he's an arborist, they established Echolands Winery in the Walla Walla Valley ABA. And we had a selection of wines sent to us that we're going to talk about. And I've not been to the Walla Walla Valley. Have you?
No, I have not.
Well, we're eager to learn more and get out there.
No.
But we're so excited to see Doug. We saw him at Tales of the Cocktail, and we got him back on. I'm going to welcome him, and then we're going to show a video. Okay. So, Doug Frost, welcome to the Connected Table. David, you were saying something?
Well, I was just saying this is a repeat, too. We've had Doug on the show before.
Yeah.
And now we're having him here to talk about the wine, because he hadn't really come out with the wine yet when we last talked.
This is a whole new chapter, and we want to showcase that. So, hey, Doug.
Hey, Melanie. Hey, David. How are you both?
Nice to see you. How are you?
So you're in Kansas right now. You're in Kansas City, Kansas.
Yes.
We're going to just briefly show a video to transport our viewers and listeners. I'm sorry. Just go to YouTube, the Connected Table TV YouTube to see the full thing. A short video, but everybody hang in there to show you Echolands and where we're going with this. All right. Very nice. I see a lot of earth and sky and form and function. and a very interesting landscape. So, Doug, let's set this up first with what did we just see?
Well, that is the estate winery and the estate itself. We actually own two vineyard sites, I should say. And the first one was a piece of land we bought in 2017 as we were deciding to put this project together. And it's on the south end of Walla Walla Valley. Now, Walla Walla Valley straddles the Oregon-Washington state lines. So half the vineyards are in Oregon, half the vineyards are in Washington for the entire AVA. And our first site was on the south end, and that's actually what's right behind you in that picture, is looking out on some of the snow capped hills just above that vineyard called Taggart, which I named after my grandfather who grew up in the area, my aunt who lived in Walla Walla, et cetera, et cetera. So in the meanwhile, we bought another piece of land, and that's what you're seeing in that video. It's about 341 acres. Hills that rise up to 1,800 feet or so. So much colder, much wetter. What's kind of crazy about it is that Walla Walla Valley being, not that big a valley, we're 14 miles apart. The Taggart Vineyard, which is very typical of Washington State, it's desert. You get about 8 or 9 inches of annual rainfall. You irrigate or you die. 14 miles away is that estate that you saw in the video. It's 28 inches of annual rainfall, almost 4 times as much rainfall 14 miles away, because it's the rain part of the rain shadow that the Blue Mountains that you saw in the video. The Blue Mountains create that rain shadow, if you will, so that's the new estate. It's a tasting room. You saw the interior with the big windows looking at the blues, and then you saw Blake, our assistant winemaker, washing off in the middle of harvest. We finished harvest in October, and so we're just finishing cleanup.
Well, it's stunning, right?
It is. It's a beautiful area. I have not been, Melanie. Have you?
No, I haven't. I've only been to like Woodinville.
Yes.
And here's what I've learned, and you're the master. So let's just set up the geography of Washington State. So first of all, for anybody who doesn't know their geography, it's in the Northwest, the Pacific Northwest. What I learned studying, and you're the educator, I learned that most of the wineries are on the eastern side of the Cascade Mountain Ridge as compared to Oregon. We're on the western side of the Cascade Mountain Ridge, which I thought that was cool.
Right.
And you brought up a couple of interesting points. One, the Walla Walla Valley is one of the AVAs. It's hugs both Washington and Oregon, which is cool. I think there's maybe 1 or 2 other ones, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of areas like Ohio River Valley has like 5 states, but it's a bit unique.
I pulled up some info from the Walla Walla Valley AVA website.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that it's a big agricultural hub known for strawberries, apples, asparagus, and onions, as well as wine. And there's about 120 wineries, including Echolands. Now, we just learned with you that you have family history in the area. So tell us about that.
Well, my mom was born in Tacoma. I was born in Portland, Oregon. My grandfather, like I say, grew up in Wenatchee. And so even though I live in Kansas City, we moved out to the Midwest when I was a little kid, but everybody else in the family was, certainly the extended family, everybody else is on the West Coast. And so we were the black sheep of the family, and we would come, drive back and forth to the West Coast, mostly to the Bay Area, because that's where most of the family ended up. And so I got into the wine business out here in Kansas City, and then had an opportunity to buy some land in Walla Walla. And the truth of the matter is that my business partner, who you mentioned earlier, Brad Bergman, he was kind of on me to buy something on Howe Mountain or someplace else in Napa or at least in California. And I said, no, we're not going to do that. And the answer is, when people ask me why, there's several reasons. One is certainly price. I mean, the price of land, unplanted land in Walla Walla, was a fraction of what I would pay in Napa Valley. Mm-hmm. And 2 was, I feel like it's one of the reasons that I'm not in the Willamette. Like you said, the Willamette in Oregon is right between the coastal and the Cascades. It's a much cooler and wetter site, ideal for Pinot Noir. But 1, I knew that my business partner, Brad, didn't really care about Pinot Noir like I do. 2, I feel the same way about Napa. They don't need me. They don't need me to come along and go, Doug's got a better idea. It's
it's a saturated area, that's for sure. And I think you have the ability to really kind of get in on the ground floor and build up in Walla Walla.
Yeah, it really is true, David. I think a lot of it was my feeling that I had a different vision of wine in Walla Walla than maybe was common there. And so I thought that there was something that we could do that would add to the industry. And I have to say, I've been going to Walla Walla since the mid 80s. I was a wholesaler, fell in love with frankly, with Oregon wines and with Washington wines back in the early 80s. And so from 1984 onward, I was buying wines from there to sell in the Missouri market because I was obsessed with these wines. And I made friends, some of whom are still around, like Trey Bush and Christophe Baron, and some that have passed on, like Eric Dunham, who was certainly part of my love of the area. I just fell in love with these people and with this area, and so it really was a place I wanted to go when I had a chance to finally build a winery and start a vineyard.
I knew you because when I was running the James Beard Awards, the American restaurant in Kansas City was constantly being nominated. I think they eventually won thanks to your work. How long did you work with the American restaurant?
I was really only there for a few years, but there were formative years. I worked with, Michael Smith, and I worked with Selena Tio, both of whom won James Beard Awards there. So it was a two-time winner, which was a big deal, and it was really a fun place to work. But at that point in time, I had started to create a client list, some of which are still around, like United Airlines. I still choose the wines for them, and some, like Princess Cruise Lines, or what, off and on retail chain based in North Carolina called Wine Store, and some of these clients that were going to help me get going. And as you mentioned, I started something at the time with a colleague named Steve Olson. That was the precursor to Bar. And Bar, as you mentioned, there's a documentary out about it right now, just called Bar, that just came out and is on Amazon Prime now. And it's a fun portrayal of what we've done with that program, because it's now 20 years old. So
unbelievable.
Has it been that long, really?
Yeah,
it's a terrific. So just everybody, it's called Bar, and you said Amazon Prime. We saw the preview.
We saw the premiere.
The premiere.
Exactly.
And it exceeded my expectations. That's all I'm going to say. I had such a feeling for all of the students and what they were going through and their purpose. It's a terrific documentary, everybody. Bar, really terrific. So here's something I learned. I was writing a blog post about the late, great Joe Baum.
Oh, yeah.
I learned he was asked to design the American restaurant.
Absolutely.
In Kansas City. I had no idea.
No, it's so true. The funny coincidences, or the links, if you will, because Joe Baum, because he was there, he brought in Kevin Zeraley to teach classes. So Kevin was one of my early mentors. I have to say, and I tell Kevin this, he always gets mad at me. I'm like, "You're the father of us all." And he's like, "Shut up. I'm not older than you." And I'm like, "Well, whatever, dude. You were there first. You're one of the greatest, most entertaining speakers about wine." Yeah. And I've tried to emulate you ever since. And the funny part about it, Bar, one of the bar partners is Dale DeGroff, who was Joe Baum's cocktail guy.
Right.
So, all these connections were made. Actually, what's even weirder, the guy who introduced me to Dale DeGroff a million years ago was one of my high school chums from Hutchinson, Kansas. He was the maitre d' of Rainbows and Stars, the nightclub at Rainbow Room. So all these crazy connections.
Well, you know what I call that? 6 degrees of separation.
It is separation.
That's going to be a book. It's going to be a book. It's going to be a book. So really cool.
Doug, before we get into the wine, let's talk about you a little bit. Well, we know you very well and have known you for years, but a lot of our listeners may not. So tell us how you got into wine and what the path was, and your path to the MW and MS as well.
Well, sure. I was working in restaurants at the age of 14. I was washing dishes, continued to work in restaurants, became a bartender. Actually, before it was legal, I lied about my age. So I was bartending at 18 and 19, in Colorado, and started working in restaurants. Again, my high school chum was working at a particular restaurant in Kansas City called Plaza 3. I started working there. And a wine steward there, a guy named John Scupney, He, in the first week I was there, he said, "You seem to know something about wine," which I did not, but I was a good mimic. In my undergrad degree is in acting and directing. So he was like, "Wow, you're a really good wine salesman. You seem to know a lot about it." I'm like, "No, I know how to pretend to be John Scupney." So I sold a lot of wine. I won the contest. So he took me to wine tastings, and my eyes were just open. I had no idea. My uncle, another reason why I call the vineyard Taggart, my uncle, Gene Taggart, poured me my first glass of wine when I was 15 years old. It was Louis Martini Special Select Pinot Noir 1968. Good way to start. Just to be, complete full disclosure, second glass of wine was Country Quencher, and I think Strawberry Hill was the third glass of wine. But I started good, and this restaurant past took me into hotels and helping run multiple restaurants with hotels, and then into distributorship. And so I was now, and I still remember one of my closest friends to this day hired me at that time. And this is back in like 1981 or so. And he said, "You seem to love writing wine lists." And I was like, "This is the most fun I've had. I've got 2 restaurants and a banquet hall that I can write wine lists for." He's like, "How would you like to write 100 wine lists?" I was like, "Okay, sign me up. I'm in." And I became a distributor, basically consulting with restaurants, including one called Starker's, Harry Starker's, which won a grand award from the Wine Spectator. One of my close friends, his uncle owned the place, so we collaborated on that wine list. It just really, I just fell into this thing that I loved, and I had great mentors like my friend John Scupney and Mendel and watching Zarelli work and people like that, and just managed to build a career out of that. And then once I finished my Master Sommelier and Master of Wine in 1993, I finished both. And I do have to say, I was number 2. The first guy was 2 years before me, was Ron Wiegand. And if he's listening to this, I'm like, "Ron,
wow,
you're number 1. Okay, we know."
And are there still only 4, or was that like old news and it's more now?
No, there's actually still only 4. So
who are the other 2?
crazy. It's a little crazy. But I think that the honest truth about that is most people finish one and they're good. It's like, it requires somebody very, very insecure living in Kansas City in the wine business to need both of them. It's like,
look at me.
Well, it's a masterful accomplishment and a great thing to have on your curriculum vitae, as they say. And I think many, as we get the announcements of new master sommeliers and masters of wine, I admire them because it is a rigorous process.
It's true. Yeah, it's very true. I mean, supposedly it depends upon how you do the math, but it has a very low pass rate, under 5%. And typically we'll say that the MS, if you get through it, is a 5 to 8 year process, and the MW, if you get through it, is an 8 to 11 year process. So I was fortunate. I was kind of ready to go, and I passed the MW in the days when you didn't have to write a dissertation.
Right.
So I got through both of them in under 5 years. But that was then. I'm an old guy. I forgot.
Would you recommend in because you're the wise guy, would you recommend to people who are younger or starting out in the business or career changing or whatever, would you recommend that they get some level of certification? It may not be MW, MDES, maybe WSET. What would you tell them? And what would you like to say?
I think that's a great question. And I really would say, yes, some certification, not for the postnominals, not for the title, but because it's there's some version of discipline, of study, research, and understanding and comprehension. And actually, probably more importantly to me, certainly at the time, more importantly to me, the camaraderie, I got to meet my tribe. I was like, truthfully, the MW I was prepping for kind of got involved and had to step away because of work stuff. I got back into it. And 2 weeks before the advanced sommelier exam, I was told about it. And on a lark, I show up for it, and I passed by a miracle. But the truth is, I didn't mean to do both, but they helped each other. And they really were that, as I say, those moments when I looked around the room and thought, these are my people. Why haven't I been hanging out with these people before? Even if I don't pass, I don't care. I got to meet these people and become a peer of theirs. And I'm just really grateful for that.
I think it's important. I mean, for me, I did through the Society of Wine Educators. For me, it added a dimension of understanding, particularly when it gets to viticulture. Yeah. and terroir. And I have, to my right is my textbook, Open to Washington State, because I constantly refer to it when I travel now and look at the maps and everything. It helps in that context, which leads us to why in 2018 did you decide to go into the producing wine, when we know it's historically a money losing operation? It's very challenging and people are drinking less wine and all that. Why then? And why? And why? We know why Washington, but why did you make this choice?
Well, at my age, I honestly saw it as, this is it. This is your one chance to do this. If you're going to do it, do it. And I really did feel that my understanding was incomplete. I feel strongly, I say it all the time, that the more I learn about wine, the stupider I feel, because it's just unending. And I knew how ignorant I was of the production side of things. And I knew there was really only one way that was going to change. And that was, drop yourself into the deep end of the pool and start paddling as quick as you can. And fortunately, I've had two really good winemakers. My initial winemaker was a wonderful guy named Taylor Oswald, and he and I were the show for 3 years. It was basically the two of us doing everything. And nowadays, we hired Brian Rudine, who's incredibly talented and wonderful guy to work with. He's the GM of the winery, because I was general managing from 1,000 miles away.
Yeah.
Incredibly stupid idea. And so we've got a staff now and some wonderful people that I work with. So I get to ask more questions than try to provide phony answers.
Yeah.
It really is a hands-on business. As you probably know, that I also made wine. My family had a winery in New York for a long time, but it's a very hands-on business and constant, 24 hours a day, all year long.
And change.
There's something always happening, and there's a lot of change that happens throughout that year too. You can't predict what's going to happen in the fall.
Well,
and the spring.
And you live in a climate. Before we went on the show, we were talking about climate issues going on right now in Washington State. I mean, you're constantly dealing with that.
Yeah, 2018 was our first full vintage, and I love telling people that 2018 was the kind of vintage where an idiot could have made good wine, and he did. And in 2019, it froze 3 times before harvest was over. I was out of my mind. I was like, is this what I'm dealing with? 2020, everything looked great. And then the West Coast was set on fire. And so we lost almost 25% of our crop to smoke damage. And then, 21, it was the hottest vintage on record. It was 118 degrees in Seven Hills, 6 degrees higher than had ever been measured. And then you got 22 when all of a sudden it rains, it pours, and it's cold as hell. And we're like, so every vintage has been one of those, just hold my beer, watch this.
Right.
Yeah, and you drink a lot of beer when you make wine.
That's true. That was our unsung motto at our winery. It takes a lot of beer to make good wine.
I have a very basic question. What is Echolands? Was this part of the region, or why the name?
Yeah. So the name, obviously names are hard to come by.
Right.
And so I had already decided that the vineyard would be named Taggart after my grandfather. He's the only grandfather I knew. And he was a baker by trade. So he taught me about flavor. And as I say, my uncle, Gene, his son, and my mom, is Taggart, la, la, la. So, that was easy. It was Taggart Vineyard. I did a search. The name was available. Great. Echolands I went to work on, or I came up with, really, because I literally, to figure out a name, I'm like, I have to have a name. We're out of time. And so I took a bottle of Côte Rôtie, because the first wine we made was Syrah. And I took it up to the top of Taggart, and I had a glass, and I popped it open. And I said, I'm not leaving this vineyard until either the bottle's empty or I've got a name. And so I kind of stood up after a few glasses and started yelling. And you can see basically underneath you in that picture behind you is a canyon where Lower Dry Creek is. And so as I stood at the top of our vineyard, which goes up to 1,300 feet, and I yelled, my voice came back. And I thought, okay, Echo is a good thing, because I've always told people, the decades I've been in the wine business, people are like, well, what should I call, what should be on the label? And I'd always say the same thing. Tell me who you are and tell me where you come from. So, the vintner's name is on the back of the label and where the wine is grown. But Echolands, it suddenly appealed to me to say something about echo, and lands just kind of, was the name available, because I realized I need to admit to people, I live in Kansas City. This is in Walla Walla. It's like an echo. It's not a direct voice. I have to admit to people. And so the name was really an admission of that. But wait, there's more. Which is now I'm like 2/3 through the bottle, and I'm like, but Ovid's Metamorphosis, where we get the myth of Echo, is really instructive here, because remember, the gods give Echo the gift of voice so she can declare her love for the youth Narcissus. And I'm going to go bad taste in men, sister, because, he's a narcissist. And so, the gods are assholes. So they're like, you can only say what is said to you. And I thought, well, what an apt metaphor for winemaking. You shouldn't try to add your voice to it. You should merely let the grapes echo the land, let the wine echo the grapes, and let that be all. But I have to admit, there's one other connection because I finished the bottle, and that's Walla Walla. It's an echo. So.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah. So, I'll come up with a fifth reason. There's got to be another reason.
Well, it works for us. We like the name a lot.
I love it.
And we like the wine too.
So your Walla Walla is known for Cabernet. You make a range though. We tasted, I think it was 6 or 7 wines. Actually, we have not tasted 2 of them. But you, do a range. We taste, when we'll go through, we tasted 2 Riesling.
Yes.
A Sauvignon Blanc, which is very different from a lot of the Sauvignon Blancs that I've tasted. Very distinct and probably one of my first. And I think Sauvignon Blanc's strong up there. The Cinsault, which we loved.
Oh, cool.
Just loved. The Cabernet Franc, which was terrific.
Fabulous one.
The La Colline vineyards, so different vineyards. The Syrah. And then Rosal, which we haven't opened because it's a Bordeaux blend.
Yes.
A Cab Merlot, Cab Franc, and Petit Verdot. What do you feel are your strong points here? And what do you feel are the wines that really in that range? And there's others. This is what we tasted. What are you best known for?
Well, the Cab Franc we've planted more Cab Franc than anything else. And, probably the highest accolade we got was earlier this year, Decanter Magazine, which they do their World Wine Awards. They taste 17,000 plus wines, and they picked 6 American wines to give a platinum or higher award to. And one of them was our Cab Franc. It was the only Washington State wine that won a platinum or better award. And so, we are very grateful for that. But if you tasted the Cab Franc, it's a bit more Loire-ish in style. It is a funny coincidence again that my first mentor I mentioned, John Scupney, he went on to found a winery in Napa Valley, which specializes in Cabernet Franc. It's a winery called Lang and Reed. And, he and I still talk. And still have a close connection, and Cab Franc's a grape that I felt needed more love and attention. It was one of the reasons why one of the goals of the winery was to bring more attention to Cab Franc. Certainly, Syrah is something I love dearly, and so that was the first wine we made. And finally, I think Bordeaux style blends are one of the strengths of Walla Walla Valley.
Right.
So I felt that we had to focus on that. So we make a few different Bordeaux blends, the Resound being more Cab dominant, but we make another one called Groundswell that we've already sold out of, but I'll get you 23 when it's released, and it's more Cab Franc Merlot. It's more right banky, if you will.
Well, I have a few questions. So the Cab Franc, we love Cab Franc, and the East Coast is very strong in Cab Franc. We love the Loire Cab Franc, so we're already built-in fans. The 2023 Walla Walla Valley Cab Franc that you sent us was 75% Cab Franc,
yes,
19% Merlot, and 6% Cabernet Sauvignon.
Yeah, it kind of begged for us to go ahead and let it, because the previous Cab Franc was very almost 100%. But in 23, it was one of those things where the Cab Sauv and the Merlot were just begging us to say, go ahead and bend your rules a little bit on this one. So we make another one that is mostly Cab Franc and a little bit of Merlot, but I sent you that 23 because it was 23 is just a great vintage up and down the West Coast, as far as I'm concerned. I think Oregon did great work, and California, if you were willing to let the fruit hang a little longer and didn't lose your nerve, you ended up making wonderful wines. And so the 23s were kind of begging us to say, it comes back to my MO that the wines are going to tell you what they want to be. You can't just impose your will upon them simply because you want it to be a particular style. So I embrace the fact that every vintage sometimes the style is going to shift. So the difference between our 22 that the decanter loved and the 23, they probably won't love the 23 as much because it's a little more American.
Well, I think that's one of the great things about wine, to be honest, is that the vintages are different, which is why it's a never-ending learning process.
Which
Yeah,
leads to another question. So the Syrah, we take that's a very earthy, herbal, firm Syrah. And then looking at the text sheet, it has a weensy-teensy bit of Viognier.
Yes.
What does the Viognier bring to it?
Well, the Viognier, in truth, there is in winedom, there's this belief that Viognier will help you adjust your pH. And there's this belief that Viognier will help you fix color. And I would have to say I've read a lot about that. And there is no evidence to support those long-held myths. So Viognier is there, one, because there's Viognier grown right next to my Syrah, so why not? Two, because I love Côte Rôtie, and Côte Rôtie almost always has 2 or 3% Viognier in it, and it adds a little floral note. It adds some, hint of complexity, and it provides almost like a little smile, somewhere in, as you say, what is otherwise sometimes an earthy, hopefully not dour, but certainly can be a bit of a serious wine, and the Viognier provides a little, smile on top of it.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Yeah, no, it definitely was a very different.
Do you have plans, or are you, that we haven't had doing any Viognier on its own?
No, but we did go ahead and plant some Viognier because we've now planted Vermentino, Grenache Blanc. And I think the Viognier will probably be a wonderful helpmate there, that we can use some, sure, in our Syrah, but I think actually it'll be fun to play with it with Grenache Blanc and Vermentino as we go forward.
And you do a Grenache Rouge as well. We didn't try that, but let's talk about the Rhone varietals, because we did have the Cinsault,
yes,
which is blended with Syrah, and it was lovely.
Well, thank you. It's very fun. It's certainly I think a really cheerful wine. I'll be honest, the story behind the Cinsault, if I'll be forgiven for telling a story on Pascaline Lepelletier. Do you know Pascaline Lepelletier? Yeah, of course you do. So I showed my Grenache to Pascaline a couple of years ago, and I quote, she said, "Doug, I like your wine, okay, but I not buy. I tell you what, you put some Cinsault in your Grenache, you bring back to me, maybe I buy." It's like, okay, if Pascaline tells you to do it, okay, you go and plant Cinsault, and I planted too much. So I had this Cinsault left over. So now the Grenache is 10% Cinsault, and the Cinsault is 10% Grenache, and both of them are better. And they're just, they're really fun wines to make. And they appeal to me partly because obviously the market is always changing. And I had believed for a long time that we needed to make some obviously big, bold reds, but we also need to make, if not more whimsical wines, certainly easier wines to drink. Lighter reds are now kind of a thing, and we planted them before it had turned into a thing. But I just believe in that because I like to drink them. And I told my business partner, I was like, Brad, we're going to make a bunch of wine that we like to drink, because we may have to drink them all. So, make sure you like the wine you make.
Well, we're big fans of your Cinsault. It was a lovely bottle of wine to have. Kind of it's the only wine that he sent us that had a screw top, which makes it easy to open.
Yeah.
And it was a very enjoyable wine. And we're with you on the whole lighter wines thing. It is a trend.
Yes.
But we seek out lighter wines all the time.
I think it's a trend for a lot of reasons. One, the way we're eating now cries out for lighter wine, lighter reds.
100%. It's really my experience as well. I don't eat that same kind of big, powerful food that I think we associated with a different generation, if you will. And I love having a lighter red because I can have it with fish too. I eat a lot of fish, or vegetarian. I can eat it with vegetarian. I'm happy with that.
Yeah, I think we've been big on that. We live in Louisiana, so chillable reds.
Yeah,
it's just different.
It's
Yeah. Totally. So the Rosal, which we haven't opened, because I'm wondering, it's a 2022. We were wondering when that best open the bottle time would be. I figured we'd need more time, but it's a classic Bordeaux blend. You said you had a couple of them. What was your thinking behind this?
Well, as I say, I think it plays to the real assets of Walla Walla Valley. And I've always loved the idea of blending to make something better than this, the sum of its parts. So it was for me something we need to do. We need to show, if nothing else, to say, well, look, this is what message we can create by putting these different pieces together. That little bit of Petit Verdot, I would never put that in a Cabernet Franc, for instance, if it were a standalone Cab Franc, because it would overwhelm it. 2% Petit Verdot will step on everything. But when you have Cabernet Sauvignon and Merlot and Cab Franc, that little tiny piece of Petit Verdot is the salt in the soup. It literally adds, it helps bring pieces together and make them work together. Obviously, if you add too much Petit Verdot, it's like too much salt. It tastes crappy. But similarly, without the Petit Verdot, the soup is kind of like, I don't get it. What are you trying to do here? And then you put the salt in there and you go, oh, this is delicious.
I love that comparison.
Yes.
If you're cooking everything. So,
why don't we talk about the Sauvignon Blanc, because we opened it last night.
Yeah, we did.
Oh, cool.
And
it was racy.
Enjoyed it quite a bit.
Yes.
And that's obviously from our home vineyard. That's the Taggart Vineyard Sauvignon Blanc. And it's a bit of I wouldn't call it an accident, but it was a pivot away from what we had intended to do. For instance, to explain, we were making a wine, which we continued to make. We're out of it right now, but it's called Albus, and it's just Latin for white. And it's a Sauvignon Blanc Semillon blend. And that came from Taggart. But then in January of 24, on January 13th, the temperature dropped to 18 degrees below zero in Taggart and in much of Walla Walla Valley. And the initial report was, you've lost your entire crop. You may have lost much of your vineyard. Of course, I was like, oh my God, here we go again.
Right.
So immediately on January 14th, Brian and I were on the phone trying to find people who had fruit, because Walla Walla was theoretically wiped out. What turned out to be true was we only lost about a third of our crop, which is, of course, hilarious about, wine growing. The good news, only a third of your crop is gone. Right. Great. So, but in the meanwhile, it was like, okay, we can't make Albus from Taggart. We got to go to another place. And so we went to Yakima, to this vineyard called Angelina, which is up at about, it's about 1,300 to 1,600 feet elevation. We know it well. Brian used to work with it. And so we bought Sauvignon Blanc and Semillon from them and blended Albus. Meanwhile, we're looking at our vineyard and the Semillon is wiped out. It's gone. But the Sauvignon Blanc came through, and it came through really well. And so I said, well, we don't need two Sauvignon Blancs, quote unquote, that are two versions of Albus, which is more stainless steel, more, sort of Bordeaux Blanc-y. I was like, it's time we tried Pessac Léognan or Grave Blanc or whatever you want to call it. So it's 100% barrel fermented. I kind of defy people to notice that, because it doesn't seem barrel fermented, but it seems very textured. And it seems, it has an intensity that the barrels give it. It's about half of the barrels were brand new. But it was an experiment. It was a happy experiment. I'd played around with this with one barrel in 23. And so I was like, I know this will work, or at least I think that this will work. And since I'm going to get some Sauvignon Blanc off of Taggart, despite what Mother Nature threw at me, let's go for it. And I'm hopeful that wine is the kind of wine in 10 years we'll taste and go, this is from where? Because I think Sauvignon Blanc is capable of aging, but it's very few of them that are.
Yeah. It's interesting. Very, very interesting.
Well, we love the fact that it has 15% Semillon in it as well, which is one of our pet grapes.
We love Semillon.
Yeah,
I mean,
some of my Semillon was wiped out, but I had a little bit of Semillon. We didn't make very much of the wine at the end of the day, but I was like, that Semillon, it adds texture.
It does.
Yeah, the thing that's interesting is I'll do 3 days of skin contact on the Sauvignon Blanc, but I definitely don't do that on the Semillon, because Semillon gets kind of weird and oily if you do that.
Yeah.
But in contact, it's a trick I learned in Bordeaux 20 years ago, and I was like, we're going for it, man. We're doing skin contact. We're going to get crazy. So it was fun. I'm happy with that wine.
I think skin contact is the little thing that they don't tell you a lot of times.
It's true. No, it's true, because it sounds weird. Yeah. Red wines, sure. White wines,
yeah,
what?
Of course.
Yeah. Very interesting. Let's talk about the winery and the structure, because here we're going to pop a photo up because it's quite striking. Our engineer Juan will put the photo up shortly, but and then that'll lead into the visitor experience. I mean, it kind of like talk to us about who designed it and the element, because a lot of this is to really be in sensitivity to form, function, earth, sky, and nature, and being well blended.
It's true, and I will always have to admit that very little of the design is me. I mean, I certainly had some ideas, but my business partner Brad Bergman had been down this road before. Certainly not with wineries, but with other buildings. And our architectural firm Soderstrom, based in Portland, Oregon, I knew of them from Adelsheim a million years ago. They did the cellars there. And I'd seen some of their work, and the two primary people there, but it actually was the whole firm, obviously, was involved in the design of this. And the more we talked about it, the more I loved the direction it was going. But I have to say, Brad and I had one rule from the get-go, which was, we think it's crazy that if you go to Walla Walla, the most beautiful part of Walla Walla are the Blue Mountains, and hardly any winery has windows that face the blues. It was like, we want to be cantilevered off the hill and just nothing but the blues, and Wayne Van Loon and Larry and Farrar and everybody at Soderstrom, Caitlin, they were all like, yeah, we get it. We totally get it. So we all went up to the top of the hill, walked around for hours on end. And then they came back with an idea that Brad just kept pushing, in certain directions. And I'm really pleased with it. So what you saw, that big, long lit area, is literally the walkway. Off to your right is the barrel room that you can see through windows. And then when you get to the end of it, you see that big open room that you saw in the video that faces the blues.
So when you go there for a tasting experience, what are some examples of tasting experiences that you offer to people who wish to visit Echolands?
So we do flights. The flights are ever changing. So it may be that you do a Rhone flight. So you see the Sanso, you see the Grenache, you see the Syrah. It may be that you do more of a Bordeaux flight. These days, or certainly during the warmer months, we were very focused on the white wines that we make, because we not only make the Sauvignon Blanc. As I said, we had the Albus until that sold out. We had a small amount of Grenache Blanc that we fermented in clay amphora that we quickly sold out of. We made Roussanne that disappeared instantly. We made Albarino that disappeared instantly. So we're making more of each of those. So, we'll set up flights based on kind of what's available, but also the season. Right now, it's more about, let's give you some bigger, bolder reds.
One of the things I noticed on your website was that there are a lot of different types of vessels at your winery. It's not just stainless steel and barrique. You've got big oak, you've got concrete eggs, you've got some amphora. Tell us about the philosophy behind using all these different things, and highlight a couple of wines for us.
Sure, of course. Well, poor Brad, he gets to pay for the toys, because I'm always like, Brian and I are constantly like, well, what we could buy. And so the Riesling that you had, about a third of that came out of a concrete egg. And then about 2/3 of it was stainless steel. But we also make a dry Riesling that we'll release in 26 that about a third of it was in concrete egg, and 2/3 came out of an Austrian oval. It's about the same amount as 10 barrels. It's a giant oval from, with Austrian wood. We ran some white wine through it to kind of clean it up, and then fermented the Riesling in there, and it just came out beautiful. It's really wonderful how that's altered the Riesling for us. Those concrete eggs, what they did for us with the Sauvignon Blanc is add some texture. Concrete is a porous surface, and it allows this kind of continuous oxygen ingress that can help a wine to develop some texture. We've got giant concrete tulips that are, they're giant, they're like 12 feet tall. And we have done rosés in them. Once again, you get this kind of inner convection inside there. You get some porosity that helps the wine not to be so steely and tough, but allows the wine to kind of open up and become a bit more supple. So that was initially used for Cabernet and for Riesling and for Sauvignon Blanc. And we decided last year that concrete cubes are better vessels for Syrah and for Cabernet. So now the Cabernets and the Syrahs go in these rather large concrete cubes. These are the kind of toys that you're seeing now often in Bordeaux, as we're sort of going back to the past and seeing how the the world of stainless steel is useful for certain wines. Certainly to keep that Riesling that you had nice and bright and shiny, that stainless steel is very useful. But when you're trying to create more, I think, gentler or more complex textures, I think having concrete, having a lot of oak to play with, David, as you mentioned, for our Syrah, all the Syrah goes in 500-liter puncheons, which allows more oxygen than oak exposure. And for me with Syrah, that's really, really important. And I saw this in the 80s, the first time I went to the Rhone Valley. Everybody I visited had 500 liters. And I thought, if I ever make Syrah, that's what I'm doing.
So what's in your crystal ball for Echolands, you and Brad's?
Yeah, I think as the vineyards come online around the winery, you saw some of the early versions of those vines. They're really happy up there, and so they're growing quickly. We're going to have more toys to play with. Like I said, Vermentino and Grenache Blanc will probably get our first vintage next year. We grew on the Taggart site on the southern end where it's really hot and dry and windy. We grew some Assyrtiko, the famous grape of Santarém. And yeah, we had enough to make 12 cases this year because the plants are babies. And it's like, oh, this is going to be good. It seems real happy there, but it's hot, dry, windy on volcanic soil. Sounds like Santorini, so we'll see how that goes. And I think most importantly, what we discovered in the 7th year of Taggart, we really had, I honestly have to admit, I had started to lose hope in that vineyard. It was really struggling. There was really, I wasn't getting the yields that I thought I deserved. I wasn't sure what was going on. And in 25, this past year, the heavens opened up. It's like, oh my God, that's what we were waiting for. And my neighbors, like, Marty, Club at Lacole with Ferguson Vineyard was like, oh, it takes time up here. You have to wait. It's really a tough space. But once the vines get there, then you're off to the races. And it seems to be true. So we're, believing that we can make kind of bigger, more complex red wine, but we also, as I say, have pivoted to as well making lighter style reds and hopefully making more complex white wine.
Well, it'll be interesting to see where you go with this because it's still a very young winery in the scheme of things. One last question before we have to wrap. So you're part of a small and distinguished group of sommeliers of note who have ventured into becoming vintners up in the Pacific Northwest.
Yes.
With success. So congratulations. What would you say to anyone who is listening or watching to the show thinking, I want to create my next chapter and do what Doug and Larry Stone, Roger, all these people have done? What do you want to say to them?
Well, at the old line is the only way to make a small fortune in the wine business is to begin with a large one. So I hesitate to encourage anybody to do it unless you just have that burning desire and you can find a business partner or partners who get it. This is not a 10-year project. It's more like a 20 or 30-year project. And you have to approach it that way. It is just, there's no way, especially these days. I mean, the market is very unsettled. And the larger market, the world is very unsettled. And so it's even more difficult today. You just have to be in it for the long haul.
And patience. And, Mother Nature ultimately has a final word.
Yes, she does. Oh, man.
Yeah, I know. Well, Doug, it's great to talk to you again for another much more focused story of your life for the Connected Table Live. We wish you all the best. We can't wait to come out and visit Echolands and Winery and also Walla Walla and really experience it for ourselves firsthand.
We would love to have you out there, but of course, I look forward to seeing you in your
anywhere,
your town,
anytime.
New Orleans soon. That's one of the greatest cities in the world. That's all.
We'll be here.
We'll be here. So thank you again. If you are watching and listening and want more information, it's echolandswinery.com. You can go, there's some great information there about the winery. And then you can also go to the Washington Wine Institute and the Walla Walla Valley AVA websites for more information on the region and the wines, which I found very helpful as well, because it's totally unique. Because as we all know, in the United States, you make wine everywhere. There is wine made in every United States. So go out there and travel and explore and taste, because we want you to expand your palate. And we hope that this show will inspire you to eat, drink, explore, and be more inspired. So thank you for joining us, Doug, on all of our viewers and listeners on another edition of the Connected Table Live. Always stay insatiably curious.